Hey everyone, Tim here with an early look at TFT's newest set, Enchanted Wilds. Now for this video, I'm going to go over the champions and traits, give you a brief summary about what each one does, and a little bit more dev insight on how we got there and some design trends in set 18. Now obviously this is coming out before PBE, so I'm not going to go over the new augments, the set mechanic, which is wisps, because there's a lot of stuff there, and those like tuning system changes we do between sets. That's going to hold off until we're closer to PBE or even closer to release. So for this video, just champions and traits. Now, another obvious precursor, since this is coming out before the launch of PBE, these numbers are subject to change, and I wouldn't even be surprised if some of these small spells and designs change a little bit. So let's get into it. It's going to be a long video. Today, we're going to be using our internal tool because obviously we don't have everything published publicly yet. So you might see some weird numbers and debug text, but generally this is what we use. It's a cool preview about what we use. Wow, as I say that multiple times. So we're going to start with origins. I'm going to ignore mostly the legendary origins, right? The 5 cost units that have their unique trait. I'll touch on them briefly, but we're probably going to cover that mostly when we get into champions. So Blossom. Blossom is a really good trait to start with. It's going to be a great preview of what the set is as a whole. So Blossom's main gist is that they empower your wisps. Now, if you haven't watched a dev drop or haven't played previous sets, you're going to be like, what are wisps? What do I do with these? Wisps are set 12's retrain of charms. And this means that this is something that's going to appear in your shop every 2 rounds. It's going to be like a really broad way to do it is like a mini augment. So some of these last 1 combat, some of these grant resources, some of these last multiple combats, and you buy them from the shop and they empower your team. And they're going to appear every other round unless you're playing Blossom. And so Blossom's whole gist is that they change these wisps, they empower them, they make them really cool and special, and that's going to be most of your combat power. So at 3, your wisps are going to be upgraded. This is probably what most people are going to flex in and out of. You have to play it for player combat, so you can't just toggle it and then roll your shop, play it for combat. Every charm afterwards is going to be empowered until you take the trade out. At 5, as I said, wisps appear every other turn. When you have 5, they will happen every single turn. So you don't have to waste the gold rolling for them. You just have a wisp every single combat. And at 7, you're going to gain 5 gold after buying a wisp. Wisps aren't always the cheapest, but this means you can make money on cheap wisps and you can play more expensive wisps without really hurting your econ. So this kind of turns into more of an engine where you don't feel bad clicking all these wisps. And then 9, well, why is there a 9? There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 champions. That's going to be because of Lux and of obviously emblems. Lux, as I'll touch on later, makes a lot of comps very, very flexible and cool. Lux basically is a retrain of set 2 Lux, kind of plus even more, which is that she'll give +2 to any of her origins, and she can be almost any origin in the game. So if you have a Lux that's Blossom, you'll get +2. You can play 9 wisps. 9 Blossom. And so with 9 Blossom, you can buy 2 wisps around, which is a ton of power. And 11 is going to be one of our chase prismatic traits where your wisps become extremely, extremely good. So they're gonna level up even more and they're gonna do wild things. This is gonna be your game winning power. The other part of Blossom is they have a bit of HP and combat stats. This is just to smooth out their scaling and tuning, so you don't feel like you have to buy a wisp to play the trait, which can be really, really hard early game. But overall, this is going to be one of our standard verticals with 2 4 costs and a trait pair. So this is going to be your easy to build, easy to get into, but like difficult to master trait. And I think a cool trend to point out here, which we're going to touch on for other origins, is the breakdown of what 5 and 7 give you, right? 3 is going to be the core part of your trait, right? You're going to get those upgraded wisps. But 5 and 7 are going to be much more flex options to think about. Obviously, you can just jam them in and you'll be pretty good on stage 3 and stage 4. But something we're really trying to emphasize here is that later stages of stage 4 and stage 5, you can play 7 Blossom, but some of your power is going to be in that econ generation, right? You're going to be getting a lot of gold. And so you're not going to exactly win the game on 7 Blossom all the time. Just like in set 16, you're going to have to be thinking about, hey, do I need to be dropping some of these lower cost units for legendaries? Do I want to keep greeting for some econ? And that's something you're going to see as a trend. Bounty Seeker, moving on, is going to be Draven's unique trait. I'm going to touch on this later. It's almost entirely encapsulated within Draven. And then Kog'Maw for Caustic. So this Kog'Maw is going to be kind of a threat. So I'll go into more of that later. but his unique origin, he doesn't have another origin, is that he provides Shreds and Sunder for the whole team. It's going to be a good tech option if you need that. 3 cost, he can also be rerolled as a carry. There's more to Kog'Maw to unpack. Moving on, Coven. Coven is going to be our high risk, high stakes trait. It is kind of, in the briefest term, similar to Underground from set 8, but we're trying something a little bit different. So in the past few sets, our high risk traits have been very, very loss streak dependent. And then if you can't loss streak, you kind of can't play it, and then you kind of get locked out. I think there's some value to that. It adds a lot of inherent risk into the trait, which means you can get a lot of rewards, but it also feels pretty bad as you're at the like behest of like matchmaking and RNG and people griefing you and stuff like that. So that's why I'm saying Coven is more like Underground. So the way Coven works is you gather essence by killing champions, and you get more by losing combat. That's it, right? There's no bonus to lose streaking. There's no bonus for stage. So the core mechanic here is how many times can I lose and how many champions can I kill as I do it. And then beginning at 40 essence, you get to choose to convert that essence into a reward. So think about like Coven, think about Heartsteel. It's going to be the longer you have collected essence and the more essence you have, the bigger your rewards. And these breakpoints, and you'll see it in the armory that pops up, these kind of exponentially go up. So the first few are going to be pretty easy to get. You're just going to lose a few rounds and get them. But to really get the high rewards, you're going to have to be risking 100, 200 essence breakpoints at a time. And so the risk here, and this is going to be something I'm going to be very fine-tuning throughout all of the set, is that since there's no loss streak gating this, you really want to see how many losses you can fit into a game. And so now you might say, okay, well, that's pretty easy, right? Like how many people like die before losing 10 times? The answer is no, not that many. And so this is going to be a big paradigm shift here of like players will initially think that, oh my gosh, I 10 lost and then I only cashed out 40, 50 gold, right? Which would be pretty low compared to our other cash out trades. But I think the shift here is that very few players actually die when they 10 loss, right? You will be 2 lives on 4-1. So we're actually going to shift that a little bit further, is that the big cash out is going to be 11, 12, 13 losses, because you don't have to do these losses in a row. And so the way you actually unlock these super high cash outs for Coven is get 3, 4, 5 Coven in, and then try to kill as many units as possible while losing. So the more HP you conserve, the more times you can lose, and the more amount of raw losses you have is going to be how much, how big your cash out's going to be. Very interesting trait. I think it's a little bit, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because we haven't had a non-loss streak trait in a while. So if we're going through each champion here, there's 2 Elises here because Elise is kind of a form swapper or an adapter, so it kind of shows up weird in our system. But there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Coven units plus Lux. So if you have all of those in, you can play 7 Coven. 7 Coven is much more different. It's going to be just kind of a loot cascade where you can get a ton of essence very, very fast. Kind of a separate part of the trait. Eclipse, if you've watched the dev drop, is our secret trait that unlocks when you play 3 solar and 3 lunar. Obviously, we'll touch on those traits later, but this is a very cool trait where if you have both of these 3 pieces in, you will get this hidden eclipse trait, which after 10 seconds kills the lowest, like it's very simple, kills the lowest health enemy, repeating every 3 seconds. So this might be like, oh my god, really, really powerful, super freaky, super scary. What this actually means is that you kind of are playing a timer comp, and it looks really cool when it happens in game, but since it targets the lowest health enemy, oftentimes this is just finishing off targets that you're killing. So I don't want to be too worried that like, oh my god, I instantly lose the combat after 10 seconds. This is oftentimes going to kill fodder units, kill a tank that you're about to kill anyways, but leads to really, really cool tense moments at the end of the fight where, hey, like I've started getting through the front line, maybe I can start picking at the back line, but you won't be like sniping their backline carrier with this. But definitely one of my favorite traits to play, one of my favorite traits to tech in. I think the trailer web for this is really fun. But moving on to our next vertical, which is going to be Elderwood. So this is credits to the Witty, the set lead, and the whole team. This is a very, very unique take on a vertical. This, in a sense, is our summon trait, but I wouldn't even call it a summon trait. It's a very, very cool variation of it where you summon basically an entire forest. So rather than having one big dude be all of your power, like Shepherd or previous set summons like Otacon and Noxus, this is going to be spread out among a forest. So at the 3-piece, you will get 2 summons, not 1. You'll get a tree and you'll get a flower. The tree is kind of a frontline tank. It has a bunch of HP. When it dies, it's going to stun some units around it. And the Life Bloom is going to be a backline or third row kind of summon, where the longer you keep it alive, it's going to give your team AD and AP. And so you have this nice forest. Obviously on stage 2, you can face boards with 5 or 6 units, which is pretty cool, pretty unique. You're going to feel really like you're breaking the game, and really indicative of fighting a forest. Now at 5, you're going to get a second Stonebark tree. So you're going to have 2 frontline trees and 1 backline tree. And then at 7, you're going to get another summon. This is going to be kind of a golem type summon. It's not going to be all your power, right? I wouldn't expect it to be as strong as like 7 Shepherd or 5 Shepherd, but it's a fighter that's going to add damage to your team, as well as those 2 tanky Stonebark trees and 1 Lifelink backliner. That kind of ends the standard vertical progression. At 9, because we have a Lux, your plants will star up to 2-star. What this means is that they're going to get even more HP, and then their abilities are going to upgrade a little bit. Just like when a normal champion stars up, they get a stronger ability, get more HP. So just like that. And 11 is going to be the Prismatics. Super cool. All these plants are going to go crazy. So how would you play this trait? So this trait is a little bit more difficult to build than Blossom, because you're going to be leaning more on those Elderwood summons. I think most people are going to play around the 3 and the 5 just because of the cost structure. But if you look at the cost structure, there's going to be 1 of every single tank class in this. Obviously, you don't know what these champions do yet, but there's a lot of different trait webs here. You have an AD unit, you have an AP unit, and you have every single tank. So you can flex around the 3 and 5 a lot. The 7 is going to be a little bit more difficult to get to. This is kind of just an intentional design choice where it's going to be a little bit harder to get the 7. You will need a 5 cost or an emblem, which I have said before, it tends to be a little frustrating. But I think it's more exciting this set because you also have a Lux of every single thing. You have the 5 that's pretty stable. You have a lot of ways where you don't feel like you're fishing for that 5 cost. But overall, Elderwood, I expect to see a lot of clips when people go, what the heck am I facing on stage 2 when they fight 5 units and 2 trees? But one of my favorite traits. Now moving on to the next one, Eldritch. This is probably a good break for me to say, I really like the trait webs in this set because we have 3 major vertical origins, which are going to be pretty big, and you can just jam them all in and have a really good comp. But we've also been pretty intentional on the design side. Like Widdy and his team did a great job. Of the other origins are like pretty medium to small sized, which means that you can mix and match a lot of these things put together and have a lot of multi-origin traits or a big like Rift Beast thing with a small splashes. There's a lot of cool things you can do with the trait web. And starting with that is Eldritch. Eldritch is a very, very unique origin. So the way Eldritch works is that when you field Eldritch, you'll have a special hex on your board. And this hex, at the start of combat, any unit in that hex will get sacrificed and give stats to your Eldritch units. So that kind of goes in 2 parts. So 1, you might say, okay, why would I sacrifice this unit, especially on stage 2? How can I ever win a combat? Well, there's a second part. Whenever you sacrifice a unit, your whole team will get HP, right? So if you see that first number at 2 Eldritch, you'll get 225 HP. That's a lot of HP. That kind of makes it worth to sacrifice a unit early game. That's going to be kind of a lever for that. Now for the rest of the trait, the exciting part is that depending on the unit you sacrifice, what role it has, and its cost, you will get different stats to your team. I'm not going to go over each exact one, but basically if you sacrifice a tank, you will get tank stats given to all your Eldritch units. If you sacrifice anything that has the word attack in its role, you will give AD and attack speed to all your Eldritch units. And if you sacrifice something with magic in front of its role, it'll give you mana and damage amp. This will show up in the tooltip. This is what this little section here would say. But it's important to note that this sacrifices and gives it only to Eldritch units. So this kind of lets you customize your own trait. It is a little complex, but the main idea is that the higher cost unit you sacrifice, the more stats you give. And there's going to be a lot of discovery on what the best thing to sacrifice is, but generally the higher star, higher cost, the better it is. And you're going to customize that based off what your carry or what your team needs, right? If you're playing like Rek'Sai or Malphite, which are the two tanks here. You might want to sacrifice a tank to bolster your front line. But if you're playing a 3-star carry, like Veigar or Azir, which are the AP carries in this trait, you might want to sacrifice an AP unit to get something really big. And Rourke is going to be a melee AD unit, so he's going to be the one where you sacrifice AD units for. At 4-piece, the bonus is going to get 25% stronger, so just more stats here, but you're also going to give those stats to more units. And at 6, the Eldritch do, they no longer sacrifice the unit in the Hex, and that unit in the Hex will gain a bunch of bonus stats. So it kind of flips the trait on its head. Rather than saying, I'm going to sack this unit and forget about it, that unit actually becomes really, really powerful. So there's a lot of cool things you can do here as well. I think this one's going to take a lot of discovery to do. Obviously, there's a big fantasy here. If you can create a lot of super units with this. So I want to see people toy around, especially with Warwick and Malphite. You can do some really funny things. Emerald aspect, I will touch on this for Taric. It's a little bit confusing when you don't know what Taric does. But our next origin is going to be Faye. Faye is a 4-piece. There's only 4 champions in it. Rakan is going to be a tank. Xayah is going to be a carry. Tristan is a carry. And Lily is a tank. So what Faye does is it's kind of similar to, let's go with set 10 8-bit. And then, what is it? Sugarmancy in set 12. It's kind of a stacking trait, right? So for each breakpoint of this, there are going to be 7 breakpoints. There's an amount of damage you have to deal or amount you have to heal. And after you're healing that much, you get that breakpoint, you get a pixie. And each pixie is going to grant Faye champions AD and AP, and they're going to heal when they get to 50%. So let's just say the first breakpoint is 1,000. After Tristana deals 800 damage and Rakan heals 200, you'll get that 1 pixie, and you'll get 5% AD AP and a 2% heal. This stacks up to 7, and it stops stacking at 7. This isn't meant to be something you have to play on 2-1. These stack up pretty quickly because they scale with damage in the game. So obviously on stage 4, you can probably stack this within 4 or 5 combats. But the real fun of the trait happens at 4. When you activate 4 and you have 7 pixies, you start attracting golden pixies. So this is going to unlock new breakpoints in the trait. And so when you reach these breakpoints, you're going to get more and more gold. And there's a lot of these. And I think at the very, very end, there's a big jackpot with a ton of gold. Very similar to 8-bit in that regard. And so a few special notes here. You cannot stack golden pixies unless you have 4 in. So you can't just play 2 Faye the whole game, get a bunch of damage stacked up, play 4, and then get all your cash outs in. You have to be playing 4 Faye. That's kind of our mitigation for just committing to the trait. Flora Fatalis is kind of a mini threat trait. Fiddlesticks is going to be an AP tank, and Soraka is going to be an AP backliner. So it's a 3 cost and a 4 cost, and it's only a 2-piece. There is an emblem to this, so you kind of play around with it if you want. But what does this do? Flora Fatalis is on takedown, you get a bonus. When you just play 1 Flora Fatalis, so any Fiddlesticks or any Soraka, they're going to get 10 mana on takedown. Excuse me, talking a lot, so gotta catch my breath. Now, 2 Flora Fatalis, they grant an 8% max health heal to the lowest health ally. So there's kind of a mini loop back and forth between these 2 champions. But it also means that if you have an emblem, you can do something really cool, generating a ton of mana on takedown or chaining a heal to your front line. But basically, these are kind of just a small twist on a small origin or a unique trait given to lower cost units. Next one is probably going to be high-low players' favorite trait. It's Inferno. Inferno has 5 units in it, 2 1-cost, a 2-cost tank, a 4-cost tank, and a 5-cost carry. And so what Inferno is that when you have 2 in, you get free burn and wound. Right? So this is, wow, oh my god, I got a 2-piece splash. I get to burn and wound for free. Like, why would I ever build any Sunfire or red buffs or any other Morello type items? Well, that's because it stacks. So you're not going to feel like you're penalized for doing this. Some would even say you actually want this so you can get that true damage burn, which really helps shred tanks. So it's a really, really powerful 2-piece utility. This is something to always keep an eye out when you're playing on your boards. But 3 is where the bulk of the trait comes in. What happens when you feel 3 Inferno is after every combat, your first shop after each combat is going to be ignited. It's going to have a special slot in it that's going to have a higher cost unit. So this means that you're just generally going to have a powerful board. Really, really impactful in early games, right? So say you level to 5 and play 3 Inferno. That means you can actually get a 4 cost in your shop that gets ignited and upgrades to a 5 cost. You could have a stage 2 legendary, right? We've had that in one of our playtests. But this also doesn't become useless later in the game. Obviously, fielding it at the 3-piece on stage 4 means you can get legendaries a lot more common on level 8 and level 7. So definitely a cool utility flex trait. And then the combat comes back on 5 and 7. 5, you obviously have to play every unit or hit a Lux or an emblem. But you get 2 shop slots, which is going to be a little bit more consistency there, but you get a 2% burn. And 2% burn is very, very powerful, as you've seen on any of our rating items. And at 7, you basically ignite your entire shop and you get 3% burn, which I don't think we've printed in years. So the whole fantasy of Inferno is you basically light up the entire board and burn your whole enemies down. Most of these units are pretty single target, so burning and wounding isn't that going to be that widespread. But when you get to the Amumu, you get to the Lux, you get to the Cannon, these are very, very AoE units that are going to spread it really, really fast. Next origin, Lunar. Lunar is kind of a splash aura trait, right? If you see this, the cost trait structure, it's a 3, 4, 5, 5. Obviously, Lux doesn't really count here, so it's a 3, 4, 5. Right, this is going to be the harder piece of Eclipse, which I mentioned earlier. So Solar is going to be kind of a reroll trait, and Lunar is going to be a high-end like 3, 4, 5 trait. And if you field both together, you get Eclipse. So what does Lunar do? Basically, it's kind of our take on Strategist and kind of our take on Voyager from the last set, which is when you place these units on the board, they're going to have a hexes around them, around the Lunar Champion. And if you put allies in the hex, they're going to get stats. Obviously, Lunar Champions will get 100% more. That's how they get their carry potential. But this is Diana is going to be a melee carry. Aphelios is going to be a ranged carry, and a Loon is going to be a mage in the back. So generally, pretty basic trait, going to be an aura. The cool part about this is combining it with Solar. Maokai, I'm going to briefly touch on it here because we can reference it when we get to the champion. Maokai, similarly to set 14 Zac, is a permanent HP stacking legendary. But he stacks not through the shop, he stacks through combat. So when he's on the board, whenever an enemy dies, he gets 35 max health, and he gets bigger, and he scales with HP. So keep that in mind when we get to Maokai. All right, Primal. Primal, obviously there's a lot of debug text here, so what does this mean? So this is going to be kind of hard. Primal is this set's Piltover from set 16 equivalent. It's a very small origin with a bunch of auras. So when you field 2 Primal, you have an armory pop up that's going to give you one of 4 options. These 4 options are always going to be the same, similar to the Piltover inventions, except you get to see every single option. So it's going to be 4. One of them is a team-wide defensive boost. It's going to be team-wide healing. Another one is going to be Primal Champions execute enemies below a certain amount of HP. So very, very selfish for Primal Champions. Use that if you want to carry them or you want, to get through the high HP targets. The third one is going to be team-wide attack speed, increased for Primal units. So this is going to be your generic offensive option when you have a generic defensive option. And the last one is going to be a resource generating stance, which is every 20 takedowns, you're going to get an item component. And this has a limit of like 3, 4, or 5, whatever you want to set it at. So this is going to be, hey, I want to use this as a tech option and just get resources and then pivot out. So a very, very flexible trait. Note that it's a 3-4-4. So you're not usually going to get this online early, but if you do get it online, it's going to be quite powerful, giving you a ton of team-wide benefits. So if you remember, Piltover was just like that. And so you've already seen, we were halfway through the origins, basically. There's a lot of tech things you can do in. So you can mix and match a lot of different utility options depending on what you want, but you do still have your core verticals in Blossom and Elderwood. Right? So there's a lot of fun to do. It's like, when can I fit in Inferno? When can I fit in Primal? When can I fit in Lunar? All right. The next big vertical is my favorite. It's Rift Beast. These are all the jungle monsters. So this is the set where you can have those memes of, wow, this person died to PvE, but PvE is actually a comp now. Right? So if you look at it, there are 10 champions, one of our biggest origins ever. Every single jungle monster is here, right? You have Brambleback, we have the blue buff, we have Elder Dragon, we have Scuttle Crab even. So we have Krugs. You can die to Krugs for real. So the way this trait works is that each different breakpoint gives you something brand new. So it's not one-to-one, but if you had to make me give you an analogy, it'd probably be set 16 Yordle, right? A really big origin with a bunch of different breakpoints. All right, so 3 Rift Beast is going to be the Alpha Mark. So what this is it's a item that goes on your bench. It's a selector that you can use to pick a champion. And when you pick that champion, they unlock a different power. So this is, if you think about it, kind of like Mecha, kind of like, what's another way we've done this? Like Nova, 5 Nova from set 17. They unlock a new part of their ability. And this is actually a pretty cool way we've done it. The carries obviously have ways to make them carry more, right? I think, for example, Raptor, when you Alpha Mark the Raptor or Mama Beak, they're going to start armor shredding and increase their DPS a ton. So if you want to have them as a carry, you should Alpha Mark them. But the tanks have more auras, right? So this is a pretty interesting thing because we've kind of committed that, okay, like making a tank your Alpha Mark is not going to be super high fantasy compared to a carry. So why would we put all these like extra powers to make something like players wouldn't want to do? And so now you have the option of make the carry a super carry or make your team really, really like powerful with an aura. So for instance, Krug's is whenever your Krug dies, he gives a big team-wide shield. Scuttle gives your team team-wide healing. And Blue Buff or Sentinel gives your team-wide mana regen. Right? At the 5 is kind of the unique thing for Rift Beast. I would kind of liken it to 4 Yordle, but obviously a lot more powerful. Every 3 combats with 5 Rift Beast in, your shop gets completely overrun, right? There's going to be a whole new VFX, and it's going to be only Rift Beasts, right? And the power of these Rift Beasts scale with your level, so they're going to be kind of equivalent to whatever level you're on, but you're going to help get a ton of upgrades, you're going to get a ton of Rift Beasts. It's going to really help you spike your board every single 3 rounds. This is going to be kind of a resource generating breakpoint. I wouldn't say it's the easiest to like immediately go level 6 and put 5 Rift Beasts in. I think you're going to be taking a temporary weakness because you're going to be getting so much power later and consistency. But honestly, if you level to 5 on say 2-5 and want to put 5 in to get this stacking up earlier, I think that's a really good play. But the main breakpoints people are going to want to play at are going to be 3 and 7. So 7 is going to be your basic vertical thing, right? It feels like, oh, this is just a bunch of boring stats that happen every 5 seconds. But if you look at your entire board, you're powering up a bunch of powerful units, right? There's going to be a few tanks and a bunch of carries. So this becomes a really, really menacing threat. And when we get into each champion, you'll kind of realize why the stats matter. And the 10, this one is kind of something we're still experimenting on. So it could change, it could stay this. But 10 is for those people who really want to just play every single Rift Beast, right? It's not going to be a prismatic. It's almost barely not even like a mid-tier Emerald trade, if we would call it that. It's just going to be another way to play the vertical, right? So if the people who really want to play all the units together, overwhelm people with the jungle, you can do this. I'd say it's like a little bit weaker than all 5 costs. But what this does is going to give you 2 team size. So you can play Elder Dragon, fit in a bunch of legends around him, and still have your entire jungle with him. Elder Dragon is a bit unique, so I'll touch on that later. All right, Rival. What is this big tooltip that means nothing? So Rival is a unique origin, right? It's only going to be on Rengar and Kha'Zix, and they have no other traits. You can only field 1 Rival at a time for the most part. There is an augment that lets you field 2, but Rival kind of deactivates when you have Rengar and Kha'Zix, right? Because they're enemies, they don't want to fight each other. So what Rival does at its core is these units stack on takedown. Very, very simple. But each champion gets something different from Rival. So we're going to start with Rengar. He's probably the more simple one. Rengar gains 1 stack per takedown. What happens for Rengar is every 8 takedowns, he gets gold, right? He'll grant gold to you. Similar to set 16 Draven. This is going to scale pretty hard with star level. And then there's a bonus. When Rengar kills 50 units, or gets takedowns on 50 units, he grants your whole team AD that scales with number of takedowns, right? So obviously you can play him as a 3-star carry. He's going to be really powerful as a melee unit. But also if you get him a ton of takedowns, your whole team's going to get a lot more AD that's constantly scaling. So he's a pretty good aura unit. 2, for Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix does something completely different. He's the evolution guy. Whenever Kha'Zix gets, I think 25 takedowns is the number we have now, he will evolve and be able to add a new class. And you kind of get to see the classes here in the debug text. They're going to be Rapid Fire, they're going to be Slayer, they're going to be Spellweaver. I would probably have to wait and get closer to PBE to show the full list, but he can get up to 4 new classes on him. And so this makes him a very, very powerful scaling carry. He can fit into a bunch of different team comps. He's an AP carry, while Rengar's an AD carry. And a really, really powerful unit at 3-star. Also, boosts your team a ton because all of his classes are basically team ride auras. So not only is he getting more powerful, your team is getting a lot stronger. So that is the one piece. It is generally a one piece. The two pieces here because it is a hidden unlock with the augment. If you have the augment, which is called Unrivaled, you can field both of these guys together. And when you field them together, they kind of have a team up type synergy, which I probably won't get into much now. But basically, you can stack them together. You can finally play them together, and they kind of feed off each other, and their abilities get a little bit better. But as I said, mostly one piece. Not as complicated as it sounds. Stack, get kills, get more power with kills. All right, time for the next origin, which is Solar. Solar is most akin to supers from the past sets, right? It is a pretty selfless origin. So if we want to have like a bunch of carries in it, the carries have to be pretty powerful, but it's going to be your 3-star reroll trait, right? So the way this works, it's only a 3-piece. And the 3-piece says your champions gain max health, a max health shield, and deal 7% bonus magic damage, and they gain more for each 3-star on your board. So not just 3-star solar units, 3-star units in general. So the pattern here is going to play a 1-cost Leona, 2-cost Kale, 2-cost Sejuani. You're going to 3-star as many units as you want, and you get more power based off that. So you don't have to just play Kale as your carry. The key thing here is that Solar affects your entire team, right? This says your champions, not just your solar units. So if you have one 3-star, not much happens. You just increase the bonus by 2.5%. This is like flat. So if you have one 3-star, this goes to be a 7.5% max HP shield and a 9% bonus magic damage. But if you have more and more, you start unlocking breakpoints. So if you have 3-star champions, your whole team gets 25% attack speed and 30 armor and magic resist. So this is pretty powerful because you're going to have a bunch of 3-star units already, and they're just going to get more armor, more effective HP. Be really, really tanky. We expect most people to get to this breakpoint because it is part of the trait. 5, when you have 5 3-stars, this is where a lot of the power comes in. You convert 50% of this bonus magic damage into true damage. So a huge DPS increase for your entire team. This one spikes you a lot. So if you kind of end the game on 3-3-stars, I would expect it to be like a 4th or 5th, depending on when you hit. But when you get 5, that's when you start getting really, really competitive. And this is where most boards kind of end up, and I would expect them to stop, right? You pick probably like a couple 1-cost, a couple 2-cost, take a few econ augments, 3-star them, and then go and progress. Maybe progress into Lunar. And so Lunar and Solar have a really good synergy, which is we're going to have a bunch of 3-star units. You can stall long enough for Eclipse to start picking off a lot of units. Again, you can also play Eclipse without rerolling. That one's a completely different line as well. And then we have a prismatic unlock here. So it's not going to be trait based. It's not going to be tier based. Is that if you 3-star 8 units, so you have to be level 8, and your whole board has to be 3-star, all your 3-star champions ascend to 4-star. This should be levels of like automatically win the game, right? Because this doesn't just have a cost limit. You can ascend your 3-star 4-cost into a 4-star 4-cost, right? It's like automatically game winning. Obviously, even if you don't do that, you're probably going to win the game. A whole board of 4-star 1 and 2 cost is strong enough. Really fun trait for those people who love pressing D. Excited to see how people cook up the comps around this. All right, the final origin, Spriken. This is, hope I don't give people PTSD. This is going to be our Dragon Mancer trait. So it's going to be a 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 5. So basically a pretty low cost trait. Going to be pretty reroll focused if you're not going to be using it to transition. Excuse me. And so what this trait does is when you field it, you're going to get a friend. It's going to be a little Yeti that's on your board. He's really cute. He's really friendly. He's called the BFF, big furry friend. And you can choose any of your Sprikens to bind and ride this BFF. So you hover it over the BFF and they drop it on it and you get them actually riding it. Now, if you have an emblem, any champion can ride this. You put the emblem on like a Krug and the Krug can be riding the BFF. We've even had Elder Dragon riding the BFF. That looks really, really funny and I don't think is safe for the BFF, but you know. But when they're on the BFF, they get stats. They get pretty basic stats. It's going to be HP and AS, blah, 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 pretty boring. Who cares? But the real power is that the BFF has its own spell that changes based on the role of the rider. If the rider is melee, he's going to get a kind of a tanky spell, which is whenever he casts, the rider heals for % of his HP. So your Kobukos and your Rammuses are going to be really, really tanky. If it's on a ranged unit, it gives ramping AD and AP. So these things, basically, these are the 3 range carries. Whenever this Sprite casts, you get basically free Archangels, free Kraken Slayer, Kraken's Fury is what it's called. Free stats. Basic for the 3Ps. For the 5Ps, that spell gets a little bit stronger, right? So you're going to heal more HP, get more AD and AP, and that's going to also spread to your whole Sprikens. This only affects Sprikens, to your other Sprikens. So you basically get a team-wide bonus as well as more stats. And at the 7-piece, this one needs an emblem. It spreads to all of the Sprikens. So your whole team gets a lot stronger in that regard. Pretty fun trait. I think the cutest part of this trait is everybody gets to ride the BFF, and you get to do a lot of funny, wacky visuals with that. And that's going to be all the origins. Next is classes. I'm going to go over these a little bit quicker so we have time to focus on all the champions. Adapter. Adapter is probably the closest to Set 13 Form Swapper and Set 16 Kaisa. Right, so all of these champions, they have 2 spells. And you'll swap to each one depending on whether they have more AD or more AP. Pretty simple. This gets a little bit different for Nidalee, who is a lot closer to Set 16 Kaisa, where she has a melee form and a ranged form. The ranged form is going to be AP, the melee form is going to be AD. Brawler, just your standard HP class. These are the champions in it. There's 2 Nars here because he's mini and then he goes mega, so he counts in our database as 2 champions. So there's only 6 here. Defender is going to be your standard armor and MR trait. Again, 6 champions here, pretty standard, nothing crazy. Executioner is going to be our crit trait. But instead of doing that standard ramping crit chance and crit damage, which has never really felt good as a vertical, we're just making it pretty simple, pretty small here. A lot of our classes here are meant to be small, just like in the past sets, so that you can focus more on mix and matching the champions you get, rather than being like, I have to max this out. Anyways, at the 2-piece, this is going to be your precision, which is your ability for your spells to critically strike, and you get some small crit chance. At the 3-piece, you get a little bit more damage, but in a healthier way. You get a bleed for bonus true damage. This ends up to being damage amp over time. A lot of these units can hit backline at the higher cost, right? Ezreal and Kennen are like pretty big backline threats. The other 2 are like pretty single target focused, but it's really going to help you chew 3 units. And the 4-piece here, the bleed increases the more damage, so you're really going to shred people down. Something, as I mentioned in the champions, Kha'Zix can actually become an executioner as well. So you can basically think that there's 6 executioners. Hunter is going to be your AD caster trait. Hunters gain AD. And if they haven't swapped targets for 4 seconds, they gain 10% damage amp. This means that like any spell they do. So if they're AoE, they're going to have damage amp and hit other people as well, as long as their primary target does not change for 4 seconds. Invoker is going to be your standard Invoker trait, just mana regen. All these units. Something interesting here is that there's 2 forecasts here. One is a tank. Morgana is actually a melee AP fighter, so no backline forecast for AP for the first time, which makes the trait feel a little bit different. Juggernaut is going to be a durability trait. So if you see, we have 3 tank traits mentioned already. There's actually a 4th. So, excuse me. Getting away from that set 16 or set 17 thing where we didn't have a lot of tank classes, we're back to 4 tank classes, which means there's tanks everywhere. This is your durability. There was a 5 cost here, and Maokai is actually a true tank here. So this one is going to be one of our stronger late game ones. Rapid Fire is going to be your backline attack speed trait. There are mostly AD people, AD champions here, with Kale being the 1 AP attack speed carry. This is attack speed on attack, so kind of similar to Duelist. Ravager is our melee carry class. It's for both AP and AD here, right? So they're going to get damage amp increased when they're hitting someone below 50% health. And so Akali is an adapter, so she can be AD or AP. Camille is AD. Merkwolf and Warwick, the 2 wolves inside of the trait, are AD. Diana is AP, and Brambleback is the 4-cost AD unit. Spellweaver is our AP trait. Similar to set 10 Spellweaver, they're going to get AP. Your team's going to get AP, and all the Spellweavers are going to get more AP whenever another Spellweaver casts. Most of these casters are about 50 to 80 mana. Notably, there is Cassiopeia here, who's a spam dot caster, and so she can really get your spell weavers up to a ton of AP if needed. But 246, probably one of the most stable comps to play as a vertical class. Summoner is a pretty unique one. Summoners all summon something, duh. But this is not like the old summoner where everything has HP bars. Some of these don't have HP bars. Some of these are part of their spells. Some of these are like summons for real. Without knowing the champions, it's kind of hard. But basically, this is more tailored to each of the champions. At 2, all their spells get better. And at 3, all their spells get even better. The numbers are right here. It'll make more sense when we actually go into the champions. And then Vanguard is our last tank trait. It is the shield trait, kind of like Guardian from before. Again, this one also has a true tank in 5, at 5, which is Taric. So again, 4 tank traits, 2 legendaries that are tanks. So there's a lot of flexible team building you can do here because you are always going to have a strong tank anchor. So that does it for classes, and we're going to get into champions. All right, moving on to champions. We're going to start with 1 costs, my favorite cost of champions. Alphabetically, 1 is Akali. She's an Inferno, Adapter, Ravager. So 3 traits, 1 very good trait, an Inferno, and then 2 classes. And she's an Adapter, so our system is going to show this in a little bit of a different way. I'll touch on what each ability does, but this is kind of what they're going to look like when you hover an Adapter. They're going to have a default form, so Akali's default form is going to be AD. So it's going to show you the full AD spell and give you a summary of the secondary spell. And if you have more AP in Akali, it'll swap. Then you'll get the full description of the AP spell with a summary of the AD spell. Akali is a 30 mana melee unit. Her AD spell is that she throws her kunais and does mostly single target damage. If the target is burning, which they usually will be because of Inferno, it deals more damage. Now, if you have the AP version is not tied to burning. If the ability kills in the AP version, it'll cast again with reduced effectiveness. So kind of like a little bit of added complexity and interest for a 1 cost, just your standard melee carry. Camille is an even less mana caster. She's 25 mana instead of 30. Honestly, I could see this going down to even 20. She's Coven Ravager, so similar to Akali, but is in the high risk cash out trait. Her spell is she just slices the target for AD damage, and she gains a shield that doesn't have scaling for 2 seconds. So the unique thing about Camille is that she's not going to be mana locked, right? Obviously, she's a fighter, so she's not going to get mana from taking damage, but she's kind of that low cost Riven type unit that's just going to spam cast, keep getting a shield, and that's why it doesn't scale, and then pump out a bunch of single target damage. Cinderling is a attack caster. He's a Rift Beast and a Hunter. And his spell is he's going to summon a bunch of leaves that converge on the target. So he's a single target caster. Since these leaves are like individual missiles, they will redirect. So if like the first leaf kills somebody, the other 4 will apply to someone else. And it's going to apply Ruin and Burn for 4 seconds. So like, obviously there's a lot of sources for Akali, but it's mainly going to come from Inferno. And if you use the Rift Beast mark on Cinderling, he will gain 22% attack damage each cast. So your basic standard backline caster. Spell looks really cool. I think this guy is one of my favorite 1 costs. Karma. Karma is a backline magic caster. She's Blossom and Spellweaver. Her spell is that she's going to tether the current target and then deal magic damage to that target over a duration. And at the end of it, going to pop for a little bit of AoE damage. And then AoE also 30% slows for 2 seconds. So now we're seeing this trend. There's a small amount of utility on each champion. I think they're not going to like be huge draws and change all of your decisions, but something to think about when you're like, oh, what low cost unit do I want to play beyond just the traits? I could think about the utility on them as well, which is going to be kind of your staple transition unit into AP lines. She has a trait twin in Ari that's also in Blossom, and generally just a pretty stable backline carry. Kobako is a frontline tank. He's a Spriken and a Brawler. He restores HP over 2 seconds. He does his little dance. And he has a nice attack plays with a bash. Boom, does single target damage. Pretty basic tank. He is very, very tanky because he's meant to hold up the 1 cost Spriken lines. And also think about it, for every single Spriken, they're mini Dragon Mancers. So when he's riding the BFF, he's going to get a lot more HP, become really, really tanky. Leona is back as a frontline tank. So people who didn't have enough from set 17, she's back, same spot. Similar spell, but no shield. So not going to be this infinite tank as before. She's just going to be very, very tanky, no shield. The passive is when you start combat, you get a bunch of bonus armor and MR, and that's going to last 10 seconds, right? So very similar to like Bastion from old classes. She's going to be tanky. Our active is she's going to deal a small amount of damage. This is not going to be a lot of damage, right? A big shift here is that this is not Arbiter Leona. She doesn't need to be a pseudo carry. She's just a tank, right? She's going to lose a little bit damage. It scales with armor, and it's going to stun them for 2 seconds. So pretty big debilitating stun. She is solar, so she's going to be rerolled a lot, and then standard defender. Ornn, my favorite tank in the Warcraft space. Elderwood and defender. So again, armor resist, trade twin with Leona. The active is gain a shield and deal magic damage in a cone. Okay, pretty simple. Who cares? Why is this guy my favorite? Because he has a quest, which is for each player combat, Ornn stores damage as forge power. So when he takes damage, he's going to store it. This is doubled at 3-star. When you get enough forge power, you get an artifact anvil. So this is a very, very cool thing that the sets team added, which is like a little bit of chases in a bunch of different parts of the set. So the more you play the set, there's more things to discover, more things to try and achieve. And Ornn's is really fun. It's pretty simple. You 3-star Ornn, you're going to get an artifact. You might even get a second artifact, right? And if you're really, really lucky and the game lasts like 3 times as long as normal in the stage 7, you might get a third artifact. But most players who 3-star Ornn are going to get 1 artifact anvil, and this is tuned to happen around 4-2, 4-3, 4-5. Obviously, if you get them later, this is going to happen later. We don't expect 2-star Ornn with no items to get this. There are some games, if you're like really, really healthy and you have an Ornn that's like done super well, a 2-star Ornn could get an artifact, but we don't expect that to happen till like the end of stage 5 or the beginning of stage 6 in very, very rare games. Really fun quest. I basically see every Ornn. I'm like, could I just reroll this guy and get a free artifact and then pivot out? Super exciting. Pebbles is PTSD moment. He's a Rift Beast and an Invoker. He's going to be T-Hex. Boom. From set 16. Not really, just kidding. But he has a very similar spell where when he casts, he's going to start consuming 35% of his max mana. So this is not a flat amount. And each second he's casting, he's going to deal damage. So it's basically just a laser beam with decreasing mana. Now, this is a spell shape that we're very, very worried about in previous sets because it was very, very inconsistent, very, very tied to items. But it's also very, very high fantasy. So we're trying it again in a 1-cost space. Pebbles has a very, very high ceiling, but also needs kind of the itemization to support it. That means he's an Evoker, but also means his Alpha Mark for Rift Beast means that he gains 2 mana regen every 3 seconds he channels. So there's a huge, really cool fantasy here where if you build enough mana regen and the fight goes long enough, Pebbles will actually be infinite. Pebbles will sit there and channel this laser forever. It'll take some time, right? We don't expect it to happen every fight. And when it does, it's going to be 20-25 seconds into the fight. But a very, very cool fantasy that the sets team created for Pebbles. Rakan, triple traded, Fae, Juggernaut, and Vanguard. So this guy is the centerpiece of a lot of early game comps, right? Branches in the Fae, branches in the Juggernaut, branches in the Vanguard, which means he has a lot of trait connections. And all 3 of these traits give tankiness, right? Fae has healing, and then these 2 are tank classes. So expect this guy to be very, very tanky. So that's why his shield is so small. All this guy does is he shields, and then kind of like Singed from set 13, will toss a little missile and give a bunch of AX that's decaying to an ally. Pretty fun. You'll see this guy on a lot of boards. Rek'Sai, back from set 17, but slightly different. Still is Eldritch and a Brawler, which means that Eldritch means she's going to get a lot of bonus HP early on and can be very, very exciting when 3-starred because you can give them a bunch of bonus stats. And the spell is passively restore 16 health every single 16. Restore health every second. So it's passive healing. After she casts, this is tripled. So you get this burst of healing, kind of like a dot healing tank. The active is this spell from set 17. She pops out, does damage in a circle, and stuns people. Pretty cool unit. I think we've done a pretty good job of making sure a lot of these 1-costs have a pretty unique fantasy. We've had this problem where 1-costs kind of just become an afterthought and they're not that exciting. But if we look through the roster so far, there's like mini fantasies for a lot of these, right? Koboko has the whole Spriken thing, which can make him a super unit. Ornn has the artifact fantasy. Pebbles has this infinite casting fantasy. Rakan has 3 traits, so haha. And then Rek'Sai has, again, a super unit fantasy with Eldritch. Varus, Inferno, Rapid Fire. This is going to be our big backline caster. Varus winds up, fires a huge arrow, and deals a ton of damage to the first target with a lot of fall off. So this is probably most akin to set 9 Jhin, or like your Caitlyn units that has been a 1 cost. They just do single target, do a ton of damage. This arrow is not only single target, but it has a lot of fall off. So his main role is he's going to nuke a frontliner and then kind of splash the backliner. He's going to need a lot of cast to actually do anything. But notably, he is an early Inferno unit, so he means he can spread burn to the backline, which is also really valuable. Veigar, triple traded, Eldritch, Sprite, Spellweaver. So a lot of potential here. He's going to be one of our most rerollable 1 cost. He's a backline caster. He's going to just Fire Blast that does single target damage. Pretty boring. Well, not really. This is increased to 265 or whatever number is if they're below 30% health. So he has a mini execute. And if they die, he permanently gains AP. So we're back to permanently scaling AP Veigar. Really, really fun. This is 1.5 right now. Who knows what this number will end up with. But usually we expect him to be 100, 150 AP by the end of the game. And again, look at his traits. Sprykin is a super unit trait. Eldritch is a super unit trait. He's really, really cool. He has a bunch of cool outputs to get to and a lot of different comps to play around. You can have Rek'Sai as your main carry. You can have Kobuko as your main carry. Very fun. Xayah triple traded as well. So you have Xayah and Rakan triple traded. She is Elderwood, while Rakan is Fae. Sorry, she's Elderwood where Rakan has the other tank classes. They're both Fae. She's a rapid fire. So there is a 1 cost reroll Rakan Xayah comp. So all the fans out there, you can play them together. Her spell is pretty simple. She gains a bunch of attack speed and shreds armor and deals bonus damage for those attacks. Just your standard attacker. Xayah always looks good attacking fast. So pretty basic. Yorick is one of the more complex tanks for the 1 cost space. He's Blossom, Juggernaut, and Summoner. Right, so standard tank with the Summoner tag, and Summoner increases their spell power. So Yorick, on death, he spawns a little ghoul that's going to have a % of his HP, and his active is just restore health. So all his power is when he dies, he's going to spawn a second body. So if you remember, like set 16 Wukong spawned the stone clone. Very similar, he's going to spawn a little ghoul. Doesn't share his items, but it's a bunch of HP, and we've made this ghoul have a lot of AD, so low-key can finish off fights if he needs to. And Summoner will make that ghoul have a lot more HP. So that's 1 cost. Let's move on to 2 costs. Starting off, the 2 costs is Alistar. He's the Elderwood Brawler. So already we have an Elderwood Defender, Elderwood Brawler. A lot of tanks for Elderwood. Very, very tanky board. His spell, pretty simple. Restores health, cleanses disables. So, I mean, kind of not that valuable, but looks cool. And then he heals 2 allies for 100 and then stuns the main target. So a lot of text, but heals, stuns, heals his allies a little bit. Good bread and butter tank. A lot of connections for Elderwood that he reaches into. He also has a 2 cost pair with LeBlanc, so you could see Alistar LeBlanc reroll. Caitlyn, so the Coven 2 cost, also a hunter. Manaless is a backline marksman. Every third attack deals bonus physical damage. So pretty simple spell, looks a lot cooler in practice, right? Every third shot is going to be a big headshot, do a ton of damage. Pretty stable carry. Elise, as I mentioned, is here twice because she form swaps. She has a human form and a spider form, but that counts as 2 characters in her game. She's just 1 champion. Her spell, she transforms into the spider, gains more HP, and while in the spider form, she does a token amount of magic damage, and it heals for every single attack, and then she gets 100%, 75% attack speed after casting for every other cast. So that was a lot of words. Basically boils down to, it's kind of our old shapeshifter model. First cast, she gains HP, it turns into a spider. Every other cast gains a bunch of attack speed. Every time she attacks, she's going to heal. So the idea is that when she casts her spell, she gets a burst of healing. Nice cool visual differentiation for a tank. Gromp, 2 cost adapter, Rift Piece adapter. Default is going to be AP. The AP form is a big single target spell. So it fires a slow moving missile that does a ton of damage and then explodes. It's going to deal kind of a dot for all enemies in 1 hex radius over 3 seconds. And that's going to differentiate from the AD version. The AD version is going to be a big single target burst with a big burst at the end. So the AP version is a dot. The AD version is a big burst. It also slows the target around it, but that's not the most critical part of the spell. And then the buff, when it's alpha marked, is Gromp's going to gain AP or AD, depending on its form, every 5 seconds. So you get a built-in Archangels, you get a built-in AD scaler. Kale is the solar 2 cost, rapid fire, so standard attacking really, really fast Kale. This is going to be the 2-cost version of the other Kales we printed that has scale with star level. So as you see, passive, Kale ascends based on her star level. The first ascension, which is going to be the 1 star, is she's going to deal magic damage. So she has like very, very low AD, does magic damage on hit. Okay, pretty standard. At 2 star, she starts shredding. Again, pretty standard. She has the built-in shred, built-in utility. You can always throw in this unit to splash. But since she is solar, she gets that big 3-star and 4-star bonus. 3-star, the attacks fire waves, dealing magic damage to other units hit. We've seen this spell a lot. Again, I think the cool, unique thing for Kale this time is that she's in solar, which is a big 3-star trait. So all the stuff around her is going to be really cool. The 4th ascension of 4-star, since we can now get 4 stars more commonly, she gets infinite range. Every third wave is really, really big, right? This is still going to be on the same power as other 4 stars, but she gets something special because she is KO and her passive says she gets different bonuses at each star level. 2 cost. My favorite 2 cost of the set is LeBlanc, Elderwood Spellweaver. So her passive is the most important part, so I'm going to get on that later. But the active is she just launches a spell that does single target damage and a 1 hex AoE burst. Very, very standard. But the passive is the cool one. After each player combat, similar to Bard, LeBlanc has a chance to print a unit. So this prints a unit on your board. Chance is only 10%, pretty low. But this increases by 6% per takedown, and that base chance also increases based off star level. So your 1 and 2 star LeBlancs don't print that often, but your 3-star LeBlancs or your 2-star LeBlancs with a lot of items will print a lot. So this increase by 6% per takedown, this isn't permanent, right? It's until you print again. So let's say your LeBlanc kills, for some reason, 10 units in one combat. She'll increase her percent by 60%, will probably print, and then that'll go back down to 10%. So it's a very, very good enabler for both econ and reroll comps. So if you look at these 2 units right together, you have Kale and LeBlanc together, there is definitely a Kale LeBlanc reroll comp that's really fun to play. All right, Merkwolf is a melee AD fighter, as you can tell by Riftbeast Ravager. Spell is kind of an assassin spell, but it's only 3 hexes. So Merkwolf will leap to the lowest health enemy within 3 hexes and then deal bonus damage. Again, 3 hexes means that they'll get to the backline early game when they wrap around your tank, but most coming like stage 3 and stage 4, going to be a lot more difficult for them to get the backline unless you're like a solo frontliner. When alpha marked, they gain precision and 25% critical strike chance, increased up to 50% based on mythic health. So just a big DPS boost. You don't need to build IE on this guy. The next Rift Beast 2 cost is Scuttle Crab. Scuttle Crab's a juggernaut. Passive is Scuttle Crab doesn't attack. Attacks are replaced by a dance, so we have a dancing crab that deals damage to all adjacent enemies. This just looks really funny, looks really cool. I'm glad we got a dancing crab. But there's a hidden synergy here that people will soon find out. Since their attacks are replaced, that means that Silvermere Dawn will stun in an AoE. And spoiler, Horizon Focus is coming back. So if you have Horizon Focus, Silvermere Dawn, Scuttle Crab, it's going to be AoE stuns, AoE damage, lightning crab as we call it. Very, very funny. Spell, pretty standard as well. 50% durability and heals over time. And then when alpha marked, your whole team will heal when they fall below 50% health. So a bunch of effective team HP. As I've noted before in the Rift Beast section, the tanks all have an aura, and then the carries all have a selfish buff. Sejuani is probably the main tank of Solar because there's Kale, so you're going to be rolling 2 costs a lot. She's a Solar Juggernaut. Her spell is gain a shield that scales with HP, so build a lot of HP on her. Then cleave and a clone, dealing damage. Again, pretty basic. A lot of the interest in Solar is going to be how you play around the trait and what unit you 3-star, so their spells are pretty basic. Shen, Inferno Defender, which are very, very good traits. This guy's going to be on a lot of boards. He's kind of a selfless tank, right? He gains a shield for himself and an ally, so kind of like set 16 Shen, the 1 cost, and then empowers their attacks to do more damage and gives them a bit of attack speed as well. Teemo, the Spriken Invoker, the 2 cost, so this guy's also going to be rerolled a lot. He's very fun to play. His spell is called Fungus Among Us. I just wanted to say that out loud so everyone knows that this is the spell name. He throws mushrooms. He throws 2 clusters of mushrooms that deal damage at 3 nearest enemies. So basically hits 3 targets at a time. And then at the very end, he throws 1 big funny looking mushroom at his primary target. So this is kind of an improvement on set 17 Lulu, the 3 cost. That Lulu hit the 3 closest targets, but would never have the ability to actually kill her main target, which made her really, really feast or famine, right? She either killed your backline or didn't kill anything. Hotemo has this bonus for the single target. And then kind of like set 10 Bard, he has this hidden mechanic where every single cast he has a 10% chance or 8% chance to throw a special mushroom, right? This is going to be like the Doots that Bard has. Each one, depending on their color, has a different effect. Red one gives you a reroll, green gives you tactician health, yellow gives you XP. I wouldn't count this as like actually an econ generating mechanic. It's more of like a fun thing to be like, oh my god, I got a little bonus. You can play around it if you want, but it's just pretty cute. Work is the other 2-cost Ravager. He's an Eldritch unit, so he's going to get a lot of stats from his trait. So Merkwolf is probably going to be in Rift Beast rerolls, and Work is going to be more of his own comp. But he's a ramping melee carry. He bites the current target, dealing amount of physical damage, heals for amount of the damage dealt, so fake Omnivamp. And then each cast, he gains attack speed, right? So he's going to ramp, get a ton of attack speed by the end of the fight, and kind of be mostly an auto attacker. Minara, the Blossom Executioner, she's a ranged caster. She's kind of like the Kindreds of lower cost we've had in the past. She shoots a missile that does a lot of damage, and then she dashes a short distance. Has a bit of AoE as well. Pretty good item holder for Ezreal, who is the 4-cost caster as well, but also branches into a bunch of other executioners as well. So pretty cool unit there. We're going to move on to 3 costs now. For 3 costs, now we get kind of into the more deep, complex units with a bunch of stuff to get into. Azir, Eldritch Executioner Summoner, 3 traits means he has a really, really high ceiling. Eldritch means he has an even higher ceiling. His spell is he gains a bunch of attack speed and summons 2 soldiers. These don't have HP bars, these are just like damage dealers for the next 6 attacks, and they attack with them. So kind of similar to like the set 2 Azir. His summoner effect is that these soldiers, I think, deal more damage or last longer, one of those two. Basically just does more damage with summoner. He is a mix between a caster and an attacker. He gets so much attack speed in his spell, you don't always have to build attack speed on him, so you can get away with building some casting items, but his best build will be some attack speed items and a lot of AP. Cassiopeia, the Coven Spellweaver. As I've mentioned before, she is a dot champion. She is 30 mana for Spellweaver. So remember, Spellweavers get ability power every time they cast. So she's going to be a big engine for them. But basically, her spell is pretty standard for a dot spell. Poisons the target, poisons a non-poison enemy, so 2 enemies at a time, dealing damage over 15 seconds. Diana is this weird melee carry aura unit. She has 3 traits. Lunar Ravager Vanguard, so she's a carry with a tank trait. She has an aura, but then she has her normal class. Similar to Camille, but kind of taken up to like the 3-cost level. She gains a shield and then fires a big missile at 3 nearest enemies. So her fantasy here is that you build a bunch of items on her. She basically just keeps shooting out missiles and dealing AoE damage. Fiddlesticks is the 3-cost like super tank for Spellweavers, because we've always had the AP class need a good mid-cost tank. He's Lord Fatalis, Defender and Spellweaver. His spell is that he shreds the enemies for 10 magic resist. He heals for a little bit, and then deals magic damage over the duration. So overall, the spell isn't that exciting, but Flora Fatalis and Spellweaver are kind of what make him visually exciting. Flora Fatalis, again, he'll get a lot of mana on takedown, so he's going to keep doing this because he's not mana locked for that long. And also at the 2-piece for Flora Fatalis, he's going to be healing a lot. So there is a 3-star like Fiddlesticks Soraka comp. And a Spellweaver means that occasionally in random fights he'll have a ton of AP and he'll actually like start draining the backline for some damage. But overall, kind of like a staple for a lot of AP comps. Hecarim, Elderwood Vanguard. So again, Elderwood has like a bunch of tankiness in the trait and a bunch of tanks in the trait. So really going to feel like you're fighting an endless forest. His spell, he gains magic resist for a duration, heals for a little bit, and then stuns the 3 closest units. Honestly, a very, very powerful unit and kind of the linchpin of Elderwood for a while, because he is the last tank in the trait. Right? The 4-cost Elderwood unit is a carry, the 5-cost is a fighter. So you're going to really rely on that early game tankiness from Hecarim and the trait to get you through stage 4. Kha'Zix, the first rival, I kind of went over this trait a lot in the origin section, but his actual spell is pretty basic. He just leaps to the farthest enemy within 3 hexes and then deals damage. If they have no adjacent allies, so if they're isolated, he gains mana back and deals a little bit more damage. And so he's only 25 mana, So he's going to be jumping around a lot like a fly. So if you think about like set 16 Fizz, he's moving a lot, dealing a lot of damage. And that's how he's going to slowly ramp up takedowns, but he's not going to be like first dash, kill your backline, and then the fight is over. That might happen when he's 3-star, right? Obviously, he's going to be a 3-star with potentially 4 classes on him, so he's going to scale very well. But for the first part of the game, he's not a huge threat to your backline until like 20 seconds in. Kog'Maw, Caustic, which is going to be the innate Shred and Sunder, Invoker Adapter, so he has 2 forms. Default going to be AD. He launches acid at the 2 nearest enemies, dealing damage. Enemies below 50% max health take more damage. This is like very akin to set 16 Zoe, like a threat caster that just shreds, but can still be a carry. The AD version does more health the lower health they are, more damage the lower health they are. My gosh, I've been talking for so long now. And then the AP version is very similar, has the same thing. They launch acid at the closest 2 enemies, but also after dealing damage, they'll take a bleed that does true damage equal to the damage over time. Basically just more damage. I think the adapter part of Kog'Maw here is not the most important. He's just a very flexible unit to hold your items. And then if you really want to 3-star him, you can as well. Krug is the funny unit, the summoner that's not a summoner. He's going to be probably the bane of everyone's existence on stage 2 and stage 3. He's a Rift Beast Brawler. He has the cool passive that on death, he splits into 2 mini Kruglets, which you can see here. They have, a fair amount of AD. They have no spell. But basically, when he dies, he summons 2 bodies based on his HP. But the hook here is that 1, he's a brawler. He's going to get a lot of HP. And 2, his spell is gaining max health for that combat. So the more he casts, the more HP he gets, multiplied by brawler, which then when he splits, he gets a ton of different Krugs. And then his alpha mark is actually what I think is really powerful, is that on death, the Krug and Kruglet shield allies for 10% of their max health. And since he splits into 2 Kruglets, this happens 3 times, right? Once on his death, and then once for each Kruglet. Very, very cool unit. Very, very high ceilings. Very fun to reroll, right? Because Rift Beast 7 also gives you HP every single second during the combat. So he can get to a ton of HP and basically is just a huge wall himself. Mama Beak is a Rift Beast summoner rapid fire. So we have 2 3-cost Rift Beasts. They are attackers, or she is an attacker. AD attacker. Her spell is when she casts, she summons 4 tiny beaks. They're actually called tiny beaks for 5 seconds. Whenever the mama beak attacks, the tiny beaks attack at the same time and they deal physical damage. So you have a whole swarm of raptors just attacking you. And when you alpha mark them, they also get a very powerful effect, which is that dealing physical damage reduces enemy armor by 2. Armor Shred is extremely powerful, gives you a bunch of damage amp. And again, she summons 4 tiny beaks. So each attack in her spell is going to do 5. I think Rapid Fire Summoner makes them last longer. Master Yi is a Blossom Adapter. He is a melee attacker, and his passive obviously matters between different forms, but his passive is every 3rd attack is a double strike, so similar to the set 17 Yi, every 3 attacks he'll hit twice, and on takedown he gets a little bit of move speed. He's default going to be AD, and he is manaless, and whenever he attacks, double strikes grant 12% stacking attack speed. So he's the rapid attacker in AD form. In AP form, double strikes deal bonus damage and heal. So he has a big AP number in his AP form. So he's kind of more slow attacking, but each attack is going to do a ton of damage and he's going to get some innate healing. Rammus is the 3-cost Spriken Defender. So he's their 3-cost tank. He's the highest cost tank in Spriken. His spell, he taunts, so everybody who's in attack range will start attacking him. And then for 4 seconds, he gets a shield and armor and magic resist. When the shield breaks, he deals some damage to enemies in 2 hexes. Your standard tank, gonna have a ton of HP because of Spriken, and he's a turtle. Rengar, the counterpart to Kha'Zix. He's an AD fighter. He is 50 mana, so twice as much mana as Kha'Zix. So Kha'Zix is meant to be this really flighty, like jumping character that casts a lot. Rengar's supposed to have meatier, chunkier casts. He's going to jump to the lowest % health enemy within 3 hexes. So most of the time, this is going to be his main target. So he's going to move a lot less. He's going to stab them, dealing a bunch of physical damage, and he's going to heal for based off their missing health. So he's going to be a lot more front to back and chunky, whereas Kha'Zix is going to be jumping all around the map. So they do look very, very different. The comp looks really cool if you ever get the augment. Very fun augment. Tristana, triple traded, kind of like the counterpart to Rakan. Faye, Spriken, and Hunter has 3 offensive traits, very, very high ceiling. Another attack speed marksman. Her spell is whenever she casts, she attacks an explosive charge to the target, and then for each attack on that charge, it's going to do more damage, right? So you want to build like a bunch of Rage Blade, Kraken, get as many attacks in that time frame as possible, and blow up and deal a ton of damage. Bai is the Primal Juggernaut. She's a melee tank, and on attack, she restores HP. And her spell is when she casts, she gets a big primal roar. As I read this tooltip, she restores health and then gains a bunch of attack speed and durability. So her spell shape is pretty similar to Release. On cast, get a bunch of attack speed and heal up. But honestly, this unit is a staple on a lot of boards because Primal is kind of an aura trait, and Juggernaut is a pretty flexible trait this set attaches to a bunch of key 4-cost traits, which we're about to get into. 4 costs, which I think are one of the exciting parts of Enchanted Wilds. We have a few more 4 costs here, which really opens up the team building on stage 4, especially with how they're tied to the classes and traits. They're really flexible to bounce between, especially on the AP side. So one of those is Ahri, Blossom Spellweaver. This is the Spirit Bomb Ahri. This is the one that channels for a long time and shoots a big AoE missile that's going to hit, 3 hex radius, so not the whole board. She's a Spellweaver, so she's going to get a ton of AP. Cassiopeia can charge this up, and really the big boom caster in the 4-cost space that we haven't done in a while. Amumu is the Inferno Juggernaut, so this is the 4-cost Inferno, so going to be your kind of like way into a lot of these splash traits and very powerful burn. His passive is he just restores health passively and deals small magic damage, so he's going to be that weeping circle around him. And his active is going to be a stun in a 2 hex radius. Not that big. He is not the CC unit of the set, but he does a lot of melee CC. If you think about the spell, it's pretty similar to like Swain from set 16, where he just heals passively and it has a mini CC spell. And the spell will stun more if the target is burning. Aphelios is the ranged marksman. He is lunar, which again is a pretty small origin, so he's pretty flexible to add everywhere, which also means that he's going to have a lot more innate power because his origin doesn't power him up that much. His spell is 2 parts. First thing is he switches guns to Severum. He's going to rapidly attack over 2 seconds, dealing flat damage and then max health physical damage. Now, we don't do this often, and this is something we're trying in set 18. But max health physical damage means that he's going to kill tanks at a like equivalent rate to backliners. The way this works is because backliners have a lot less resist, right? So they die a lot faster to damage. So if you just have normal damage, they're going to die instantly. But since Aphelios is very front to back, we wanted to give him a little bit of tank killing power. And some percent max health is not more effective on tanks per se, but they're going to do more damage. That's going to get mitigated by more resist. So overall, if you do the math, it's kind of like pretty similar. The effect here is that he's going to be a little bit better at 1-star, right? Because some of his damage isn't reliant on his own stats, but on the enemy stats. But we think the trade-off is something cool to try. And then after he does his barrage of attacks, he fires a big blast. It's going to be AoE that deals physical damage split among people in a 2x radius. So he has a single target portion and then an AoE portion. Brambleback is the 4-cost Rift Beast. He's a melee fighter and a Ravager. He is 40 mana, and he has kind of the same passive as like Volibear from set 15 or Olaf from set 12. When the target dies, he leaps at the next target, dealing bonus physical damage. So this is a little bit different than Olaf and Volibear. Those 2 champions jumped whenever they switched targets, so they would get a lot of these chain resets. We switched this to when the target dies because those mechanics in the past kind of had very unwieldy edge cases where if the enemy built Edge of Night, you were kind of griefing yourself because building a defensive item would cause their Olaf or Volibear to jump again and do more damage and then jump back. So you got a ton of these really spiky moments that were not really intuitive. So you're just basically going to jump like 1 time per enemy. His active is he gains a bunch of attack damage, and during this time he ignores 30% armor. So if you look at this guy, his special thing is that he is very, very low attack speed. He's meant to be a slow, heavy attacker. Each of his like big paws are going to hit you for a ton of damage. And when he gets through the tank, he's going to jump and jump and jump. It looks pretty cool. His alpha mark is a lot of durability. His attacks burn. So this kind of leans into Inferno, kind of leans into a bunch of other hooks. But a lot of free sources of burn here. And heal Brambleback for 4% of his max health. So at 1-star, this is not going to be that good. But at 2-star, you can almost like completely forego a healing item with Ravager and this healing. Ezreal is the Elderwood Executioner. He's the Elderwood carry. He's an attack caster. And in brief, he's similar to Set 10 Ezreal. He's gonna, every single cast, he's only 30 mana, dash a short distance, and then fire a single target missile that deals physical damage. And then each time he casts that, he's going to gain 25% attack speed. So he's kind of like akin to his Summoner's Rift passive, gain a bunch of attack speed. Then every 5th cast, he consumes all that attack speed and is going to fire the big ultimate missile, the big wave that deals a ton of damage. First target, again, this has pass through now. In Set 10, we didn't have pass through, which meant that fall off damage, which meant that he would occasionally snipe your backliner from full health. This time he won't. He's an executioner, so he got a pretty high ceiling here. Yeah, I think it's a pretty fun alteration of the 4-cost spell. Very visually exciting to watch. Lilia. She is a AP tank. She's a Fey defender. This is one of our backline CC units of the set. We actually have 2, but she is the core output. Her core output is CC. She restores health. This number might look really low, but her trait gives her a ton of ability power, which ramps this up pretty fast. And she sends 4 butterflies out that stun enemies when they hit them. And so this is a weird stun. It is a sleep for 1.5 seconds, which is essentially a stun. But if you take a ton of damage, they wake up and take an additional amount of damage. So the reason we did this is that we just wanted to see what we could do with the stun mechanic, and also have versions where like, hey, can we have tanks do a cool fantasy? And so occasionally you have this nice visual of like, she stuns you for a little bit, but there's a big pop when enemies hit them. Uniquely here from our past CC units, this isn't a circle that stuns. She targets 4 enemies and stuns them. So sometimes this is weaker, right? Sometimes this is only going to hit frontline on first cast, but with certain positionings, right? If you put Lilia near the edge of the board, the nearest units might be your corner units. So she might stun on first cast, but this actually becomes a lot more powerful later into the fight when units die. She's more consistently going to be stunning your backline when like other frontliners die, and then she can consistently do that rather than like old units would only stun 1/2 of the board. So cool take on that. Malphite is another tank. He is Eldritch Monolith. Eldritch, again, we've talked about before, is kind of a super unit trait, so he can be very tanky. He is our threat tank, right? Monolith is a unique trait for him, only he has it. What Monolith says is that for each unit targeting Malphite, he gains bonus armor and magic resist. So he gets his own stone plate. So he's set up to be a kind of traitless super tank himself. He can be really, really tanky with Eldritch, but honestly, like just like Taric, just like Morgana, if you don't have a lot of connections, you can put him in and he'll be tanky. His spell, symbol on the same axis, gains a shield. When it breaks, he does a little bit of damage. But a lot of this is going to come from 2-piece Eldritch and Monolith stabilizing him. Morgana is a melee AP carry. She's Coven Invoker, so obviously Coven is going to be your cash out trait. Doesn't offer a lot to her, but Invoker is a mana trait. So her passive is that she just innately gains 25% Omnivamp. The goal here is that she doesn't need to build healing. She's kind of a drain carry. She is 2 range, so she'll be near the front line taking some chip damage, getting CC'd. So she really needs that burst of Omnivamp to keep her healthy. Her spell is basically the pool. So when she casts, she deals a little bit of chip damage to 3 nearby enemies. This is kind of just to give her a consistent way to deal damage because the spell is a big 2-hex pool that deals with dot damage to everyone in it. She's going to curse those enemies with those initial blasts, and if they're cursed, they take more dot damage. And so the fantasy here is that she kind of dots the whole front line, occasionally splashing backline, but since she dots the front, curses the front line is going to take a lot more damage than the backline, so she's not going to be this backline assassin. But again, like kind of the design trade-offs here is that since it's a ground dot on the floor, ground dot on the floor, people can rarely move out of it. We have a few dashes. So that's what that initial like damage is supposed to mitigate is like, hey, if they do dash out at some point, you got some of the damage in, but she's going to be a very, very high damage dealer. Going to be a really like interesting visual in fights where her HP bar goes up and down a lot. Very interesting Invoker carry. She's 60 mana and not mana locked because she's an Invoker. So if you build a ton of mana regen on her, she can get multiple pulls out at a time. Nidalee is the 4-cost adapter. She's primal, so she can pair with like a lot of other like vibe boards to get a bunch of auras for your team. And she's default ranged and she's default AP. And so she's the one adapter that has 2 very, very different spells that change her range. So as a ranged unit, she has 5 range, and she's a ranged attacker. So you want to build Rageblade Archangel, stuff like that. She gains a ton of attack speed for her spell. And then for the next 3 attacks, she deals empowered damage. Right, so these javelins do extra damage. And the third attack is a big lunge that throws it at the furthest enemy with the least items. So this is going to get this really cool visual where you have this javelin flying across the board. A lot of times it's going to do like 80% of your backliner's HP. But this is kind of like our cool design here, which is we're trying to make it so she doesn't just assassinate your backline. She's going to target the enemy with the least items. So she is kind of like front to back in like the timing, right? She's going to get through all of your backliners in like multiple casts, right? It's going to take like 15 to 20 seconds before she actually starts chipping your backliner down. And so in a sense, like she's not skipping the front line, she's just killing the fodder units around it. And once she actually does that, which is akin to killing like your fodder tanks, she will then start hitting your backline. So she is definitely not an assassin. Her melee form though might actually be an assassin. Right, so when you put AD items on her, she becomes melee, she becomes more in range. We've done some behind the scenes stuff. So if you build like a Bloodthirster or an Edge of Night or a Hand of Justice, these actually default her to AD. So even though she has equivalent AD and AP, if you put the melee items on her, she'll become melee. The melee form has a single target spell that ignores armor. And whenever she kills the target, she'll leap to the farthest enemy in 4 hexes. And so she doesn't start jumping to the backline, but once she starts killing units, then she starts jumping to the backline. So that one is a much more flighty. She turns into a cat, all that stuff. Sentinel is the 4-cost Rift Beast tank. He's a Vanguard and an Invoker. He is the other CC unit with Lilia. He is essentially Tahm Kench from set 12. On his spellcast, 140 mana, he gains a big shield, slams the ground, which is going to be like kind of a rupture of rocks at the direction of the most enemies, and then he's going to stun them. It's a very brief stun, but the big thing is here is they are mana reaved, so they have 15 increased mana until their next cast. So for like casters, this is a pretty big CC. For attackers, not as much so. When he gets alpha marked, every time he casts, his whole team gains 2 mana regen. This is like a pretty interesting effect. I think like the Scuttle Crab and the Krug ones are better tank ones, but Sentinel gives you a nice offensive bonus for your entire team. So really, really valuable for casters. So you can pair him with like, not just Morgana, but like say you wanted to put it with an Ahri, say you wanted to put it with any other of your casters, he's a really, really strong bonus to have. Again, he does have a trait twin with the Pebbles, the 1-cost Invoker. So it's pretty easy to get this alpha mark active. You just have Sentinel, you have Pebbles, and you just find one other Rift Beast. A lot of cool team building there for 3 Rift Beast. Set is the Blossom Brawler, so he's the tank for Blossom. His spell is basically he heals and deals damage in a cone, and he has a very interesting passive where the first time he falls below 40% max health, he gains 100 mana. And so he's 150 mana, so he basically just gets a free cast, but he gets basically a second life. I've said basically like 3 times on this guy, but he is big and he just heals a ton. So he scales with HP. Expect him to get like a second wind. If you have a Vow on him, he heals the full twice, and that's really interesting. Sivir is the other 4-cost primal. So we have 2 4-cost primal units, but she is an AD caster. Her spell is she throws a big crossblade that deals physical damage and then bounces between enemies. So you have big primary target with some secondary damage. And for each kill, it'll bounce an additional time. This usually doesn't proc early in the fight, but at the end of the fight, you get this interesting visual where she will kill a target on the backline and it'll bounce a few times and she'll spread damage. Since she's the one that uses a lot of the primal benefits the most, right? Primal, again, as I mentioned before, has an execute, has a bunch of attack speed, and mainly for making Sivir a very, very like stable carry. She's pretty flexible on most AD boards, right? Because Primal is only like a 2-piece or a 4-piece, and Hunter is a 2, 3, 4. Fits on a lot of secondary AD boards. Her counterpart is Soraka. Soraka's Flora Fatalis Executioner. Flora Fatalis is a 1-2. Executioner, again, is just a class. So Soraka fits secondarily on a lot of boards as well, especially because Fiddlesticks is her twin that also has Defender and Spellweaver. So every single AP board, you can always think about putting these 2 on the board. She is like set 10 Ahri. She's 30 mana. And so her first cast, she's going to do like a very small amount of magic damage. But if she's cast on them before, she will do additional bonus damage. So she'll call 3 additional stars down that deal a lot of damage. So set 10 Ahri. And now you say, why would we print set 10 Ahri again? Well, if you look at actually how the spell is worded, she doesn't have this big overkill issue. right? If a star has fallen on them, she calls down 3 additional stars. And so if that unit actually dies to one of the first 2, the last one will redirect. So she doesn't have that big fatal flaw of like, my Ari spent 2 casts on a 1 HP unit and she lost all of her damage. These will all redirect, so she's a lot more consistent. Very fun flex unit. Zyra is the other flex AP unit, right? There's a lot of things you can do with the AP trait web. She's a Thorn Maiden and Summoner. Thorn Maiden is her unique origin, right? So she doesn't have an origin. She's just her own encapsulated unit. Thorn Maiden says when you have 6 plants out, 6 or more plants out, you gain 10% durability. Otherwise, your whole team gains 5. So kind of the 4-cost version of like Morgana's passive or like Senna and Lucian's passive from set 16. She just gives your team durability. But you won't get that 10% durability unless you itemize her with mana, because her spell is 45 mana, spawn 2 plants on the battlefield that attack 10 times, and each attack deals more damage, or each attack deals damage. So she's essentially a dot champion, which kind of leans into that Thorn Maiden passive, right? So her comps are either going to be a secondary carry, or if you want to play like 6 Defender, 6 Juggernaut, and let her dot like ramp up and get all of her plant scaling, that's when she's really going to shine. And that plays in the Summoner, and her Summoner thing is her spells, her plants last longer, which means you have higher uptime on that durability. And that's it for 4 costs. And now for the big thing, the cool 5 costs of the set. All right, starting off the 5 costs is a Loon. Let's see if we can get through this before my voice completely gives out. Attuned is her unique origin, where every time she casts, she changes the phases of the moon. Now, this is a champion I cannot do justice by just giving a rundown. You will really have to see the previews, see PBE, and just get out and play her to really be wowed by her. But she is a spam caster with 1 big boom cast. So if you need like a reference, that would be like set 9 Ari or set even 16 Seraphine, right? I think she has 4 or 5 phases of the moon. So she has 35 mana. And so after she casts 4 or 5 times, her next cast will drop the moon down onto the board, right? So that literally means what I'm saying. There's a whole huge moon that covers your entire screen. It'll drop on the board and deal a ton of damage. So what Attune does is that depending on how many phases of the moon she's cast, your team will either get damage amp or durability. Ash is a Blossom Hunter, so pretty basic traits. Her spell is very unique for a 5 cost. I don't think we've done this before. She is a big dot champion in a sense. She fires her arrow through the longest line of enemies, so she's not always going to hit your back line, but she's got to fire through the front line. And the arrow opens up a big dot like rectangle, right? And this field is where it's going to do most of her damage. She can do flat damage plus % max health damage. So she's going to be really good at spreading a ton of damage and melting your front line. And when she hits her back line, she's going to slow them by 20%. So her kind of role in a team comp is to soften up the front line and debilitate the back line. This arrow damage is meant to kind of chip down front line and then like help her finish off 1v1s. But she's primarily going to be front to back, right? She does have a lot of backline damage, but she's not meant to be assassinating your backline before your front line. Draven is the backline attacker. His unique trait is Bounty Seeker, and this is kind of the most important part of him, but he also has a very, very weird spell. His unique origin is basically Ishtal minimized into 1 champion. So when you put Draven on your board, you'll get 3 potential quests in an armory. Each one's going to have a different reward. These can be things like get kills, get takedowns, cast 5 times, keep Draven alive. And depending on the difficulty of those quests, you'll get a reward. And these can be simple things like 6 gold, or they can be something like component. Or if you're really, really like challenging yourself and doing a hard quest, you can get completed items. All right, so I won't have that same highs and lows as Ishtal, but he's a different form of resource generation depending on how much you want to invest in him. Right, if you have no items on Draven, you're probably just going to be doing the easy quests that give him you like 3 to 4 gold every couple rounds. But if he's your main carry, he's going to be spitting out loot in a pretty like engaging and interactive way. Now, what is his actual spell? Hats off to the sets team. Like, I didn't think this spell was like possible, but overall it ends up like working really well. It's pretty cool. He has fish bones innately, right? So he attacks random enemies in his range, and each attack applies a bleed. So he doesn't do a lot of upfront damage, but he just puts an infinite stacking bleed, 12 seconds, but basically infinitely stacking bleed. And then he has a unique AP scaler, which is every attack has a chance to like deal bonus damage and apply 2 bleeds. So he's just going to spray his bleeds all around. And then you would ask like, well, how does he ever finish a fight? How does he do anything useful if he's just bleeding random units? So what's active is after 140 mana, so he's only going to cast like 2 or 3 times a fight, he throws 2 huge axes, and it's going to pop all the bleeds. And so it does a token amount of physical damage. This is not the main point, but it consumes the bleed and deals all the remaining damage. So this is a 12-second bleed. So before he casts, he's going to be stacking up like 5 to 6 bleeds on a target, and he's going to pop all that with a spell, and they're all going to die. Very, very interesting, cool spell to watch. Probably one of the most fun 5 costs. Elder Dragon. So we go from Draven to Elder Dragon. Elder Dragon is a Apex Predator and a Rift Beast. So Apex Predator is his unique origin. He takes up 2 team slots, like Baron Nashor from set 16. And also like Baron Nashor, he also gives +2 to his origin. So he will count as 2 Rift Beasts. Takes up 2 slots, deals 2 Rift Beasts. So he's not a 7-cost unit like Baron. He's much more akin to a 5-cost that takes up 2 slots. So you can kind of think of the dragons of set 7, but those were a long time ago. His spell is that he passively cleaves enemies in a cone, just like the normal Elder Dragon from PBE from long ago, attacks in a cone. And with 40 mana, his first cast, he will become untargetable, disappear from the board, gain 15% Omnivamp, and then crash back down, and then stun the entire board for 1.25 seconds. So he's kind of like a 2-part spell. His first cast is a big AoE stun. When he comes back, he changes it, and he gets a new spell. Every other cast, he kind of fires a big fireball through his line of enemies. And that fireball is kind of like if we go back to Ash, it deals physical damage and does a big max health burn per second. So he's basically spreading a bunch of burns across the whole board really, really fast because he's 40 mana. And if you alpha mark him, he's kind of a split between like a solo carry and like a bruiser. His buff is that anybody, it says whenever he damages them, but he spreads the whole board. Whenever he damages somebody, they'll get executed. So you have that signature Elder Dragon beam that executes people. He's 2 range, has a bunch of big base stats, basically a very, very tanky melee fighter. Gnar. There's 2 Gnars here because there's a melee Gnar and a range Gnar. They're 1 unit, they have 1 spell. He just has 2 different forms in his spell. So we're just going to look at the first one. He's Elderward Sprite Brawler. He is the like 5-cost capstone to Sprite, but you don't really need to have him. He's just a cool extension. He's mainly going to be like a 5-cost disruptor and a brawler splash. So he is a fighter. He's not a tank. He is also like manaless. He uses rage as his mechanic. So it says 0 out of 70, but he uses rage, not mana. Don't put mana on this guy. You won't have a fun time. But his passive, he gains 5 rage per second and 5 rage per attack. So this is like a fake roll in a sense. He's not always tied to attacking. And the first time he casts, he's going to transform. Okay, let me preface. He starts as Mini Gnar. He's 2 range, pretty squishy, low HP. The first time he casts, he transforms the Mega Gnar. He's going to jump, gain a ton of HP, and jump into the backline of the board and stun a bunch of people in a 2-hex radius, reducing their armor and MR, gaining health, and changing his ability. So, complicated 5 costs. Let's go over that again. Starts Mini Gnar, is ranged. After 70 rage, he will turn into Mega Gnar, jump into the backline, the enemy backline, and stun all enemies within 2 hexes. Then he gets a new ability. So now he's big, Mega Gnar, he's tanky, he's angry, he's not cute anymore. Grab and throw is he will pick up his target and he will throw it at the farthest enemy. So he's kind of like a CC disruptor. But unlike, say, set 17 Blitzcrank, this comes out much, much later in the fight. And oftentimes he's going to be hitting like secondary units, not always your main tank. He's going to pick you up, wallop you around, throw you around, throws everyone around the backline. So if you ever wonder why your tank is in the backline, it's probably because of Gnar. He also has a cool thing where if there's 1 enemy left, he throws them off the battlefield. So I kind of like likened to him, he's not like a full carry. He's very, very bruisery. He can end fights, but he's going to need like a secondary carry to help chip people down. But another big benefit of him is like if you don't have a lot of like resources and items, you can throw whatever you want at him, and he kind of works as like an off-tank CC unit as your real carry takes people down. Ivern, probably my favorite unit of the set. Very, very unique. We've never had a 5-cost Ivern, so I think the sets team did a great job on him now. No origin, no class. He is Green Father. So again, this is something I can't really do justice for with just words. Definitely check out PBE, check out the previews, play it on live. Green Father, essentially is a hex trait for Ivern. When you put Ivern in, he will light up 2 hexes. These hexes give your team bonuses. Now, the interesting thing about these hexes is that they are biomes or different environments. So he has, I don't know the exact number, 4 or 5 different biomes. So these are things like mountain, swamp, brush, things like that. And they all have different VFX. They all look really cool. And each one gives your team different bonuses for the unit in the hex. And so his whole mechanic for Greenfather is he generates seeds. He will generate 1 seed for each combat and more seeds every time he casts in combat. And every 5 seeds you have, you will plant a new hex on your board. So summarizing that again, because it was a lot of information. When you put Ivern in, he's going to light up some hexes. When you play more combats with Ivern and he casts more, you're going to light up even more and more hexes. So eventually you can have your whole board covered in like powerful hexes that boost your team. That's his aura. There is a super special thing that happens when you light up the entire board. You get a very, very special hex. I want to see you guys do it and send me your screenshots of that. But you need like a bunch of mana, a bunch of Rage Blades, and a bunch of time to get that. But anyways, his base spell, he is a support carry. Like he's meant to be a support, and we're really like leaning in on that in the 5-cost space. I think it's a very cool experiment, and I think the 5-cost space is a way to do it, especially with Ivern, who's so clearly communicated as like a supported champion. But how does he actually support your team? Well, one, for the first time in TFT, shields can crit, right? So his best build is going to be any mana item and a bunch of AP, but we don't want damage amp and precision to go to waste. So if you do build it on him, say you have like a giant or a Rabadon's on him, that damage amp is going to increase his shield by the same amount of damage amp. His spell is he grants 2 allies a shield and 10% damage amp for 6 seconds. And at the end, those shields pop and deal damage around them. Damage is like acceptable. He's not a huge AP carry. And if you cast 6 times, those shields grant stacking attack speed for the rest of combat. And that sounds scary, right? But the whole dream of Ivern is, one, he's a stalling support champ. He's like a super Drana. He's going to keep shielding your team, keeping them alive. And this is kind of his way that if he keeps your team alive and he's like your only carry and it's like 25 seconds into the fight, he's going to start giving you a ton of damage. He's got ramping up. Very, very unique way to end fights. I think his best in slot build is like Rage Blade, Shojin Rage Blade, and getting him spamming out these shields. But definitely try him out. And I want to see somebody hit that super cool like finisher if you fill the whole board. All right, Kennen. Kennen is probably my second favorite 5-cost. He's a Furno Executioner, which means that he has the power to burn your entire team. Why does that matter? Well, his spell is a very new take on how we do Kennen ult. When he casts, he's going to immediately check every unit enemy on the board and gain AP based off every burning enemy. So in the first cast, since he's only 40 mana, that's not going to be that much. But since he's an Inferno and since people are building burn and there's a lot of other burn hooks in the set, that second cast is probably going to store up a bunch of enemies. The third cast is probably going to get even more enemies. Fourth cast, people are probably dying, he's getting less. So he's kind of a ramping caster. But after charging up, he's going to dash into the enemy backline, dash into the best hex, and create his like ultimate ability, so the 2 hex Firestorm that deals damage over all enemies, split among them. So this damage looks pretty low at first, right? But since he's getting so much AP from ramping, that first cast is not going to one-shot your backline, which I think is pretty important for pacing. It's mainly just there to spread the burn from Inferno, like just ramp up and slowly burn them down. But that third and fourth cast are really going to be the ones that nuke your backline. And to like help him get to those casts, he gets a big shield each time he casts. It only lasts 2.5 seconds, so he doesn't mana lock himself. So you can just like cast, stay alive, get to generating mana again, keep spam casting, keep ramping. So he's a very, very flighty assassin in a sense that he's just going to be bouncing around the board, lighting up your entire board before he gets to that final cast where he's going to nuke your backline. A very cool take on a like backline fighter. Lux, you're going to see 50 million Luxes here. So this is my good chance to talk about what this champion does. She is Avatar. And Avatar is basically the set 2 Lux, but with a modern twist on it. Lux can appear in your shop as one of like 8, 9, I'm not going to go over the exact number, certain number of origins. And if she appears as that origin, she gives your team +2 of that origin. So this is why so many of the origins have unique breakpoints. And then she also has a kind of like double passive, right? Whenever Lux casts, all allies that share a trait with Lux, so only the origin, will gain mana. This scales with AP, so you can do funny like Archangel's things where you give your team a bunch of mana. So if you're playing a vertical, she's really, really good. But she's also very good at like activating other secondary traits. And she has a third passive, which is depending on the origin, she will get a different bonus, right? So this is a way for us to like not only say, hey, just play the Lux. If I'm playing vertical Elderwood, only take that Lux. Every single Lux has a team-wide effect that is really, really useful, right? I'll go over each one as I get to the Lux. But her main spell is just the big laser beam, right? There's so much going on with the champion that the spell is pretty basic. It's your satisfying big laser beam that does a ton of damage. And she's 60 mana, so this comes out a lot. But the cool part of the trade is going to be how you fit her in all the comps, which one you get. You can only have one type of Lux. So once you buy the Inferno Lux, all the other Luxes you see will be Inferno. So keep that in mind. You can't have like a whole comp of Luxes yet. So the Inferno one, whenever she gets a kill, she'll get 8 mana per takedown. So she's a spam caster. So the Inferno one is more of a carry because Inferno is already such a splash origin trait. Lunar, since it's already a splash trait, she gets even more splash. Her spell applies 12% vulnerable to enemies' hits. I think this one is very, very powerful because Lunar is so small. Those 4 and 5 breakpoints that Lux gives for Lunar are very, very strong. Fae. So Fae Lux is interesting in that it lets you unlock 4 Fae very fast without having to play 4 units, which is very, very strong. I'm going to say that a lot for all of these Luxes. Her ability just heals the lowest percent health ally for 18%, so she gets her own hidden gunblade. But a lot of that utility is going to be from stacking up those golden pixies from Fae. Elderwood Lux. This one has the ability to give you 9 and 11 Elderwood. So that's the huge draw here. Whenever she casts those, she gives all of her team more HP. So again, feeding into that Elderwood theme of like you're fighting a bunch of stuff and they're all really tanky. Primal Lux is probably the most funny looking Lux. She gives you 4 Primal. 4 Primal lets you pick 2 different aspects. So doubling that aura. And when she casts, she gains 60% attack speed. That's a lot. So she just chain casts, which keeps giving mana to your whole team. But mainly the power here is you unlock 4 Primal very easily. Blossom, just like Elderwood, unlocks the 9, unlocks the 11. Just does more damage, kind of a carry. Eldritch Lux is the heavy utility one. She stuns the target for 1.25 seconds, and she does hit backline, so she can actually be a very good debilitating tool. Also, 6 Eldritch is like very, very powerful, so keep an eye out for this one, even if you're not always playing into it. Solar Lux is the weirdest one to fit on your board. Right, Solar is only a 3-piece, and you're 3-starring a lot of the units on the board. So oftentimes this one is kind of awkward to fit in, but it is a Lux. It does let you drop a couple units if you need to, or you can just play more. But her bonus is she weakens enemies hit, which means they reduce the damage dealt. And Coven Lux, obviously very exciting because it lets you accelerate really, really fast. And 7 Coven is nuts. But this one has a pretty basic effect. It just shreds. So even if you're not playing Coven, this effect is pretty strong. Like 20 is really big. So just because you see a Coven Lux doesn't mean you have to skip it. You might want to put it on your board. Maokai is like a fan favorite of the dev teams. He is basically set 14 Zac. He is a tank that permanently scales forever. He scales whenever enemies die around him. So if you put him on your board, he's going to be small. He's going to be a puny little tree. And the more kills around him that happen, he gets bigger. He gets a bunch of HP. And he's a Juggernaut, which is durability. So he is very, very tanky with that HP. When you get a lot of HP on him, what does he do with it? Well, he has a passive that says for every 650 damage blocked, he pops out this little sapling. And that's going to be most of his damage. The sapling jumps toward nearby enemies, runs at them, and deals damage based off his max health. So his best build is like Warmogs, get a bunch of HP on him from his passive, and then watch these saplings actually do a ton of damage. His active is a pretty basic spell. He just hits them, heals, and does a little bit of damage. And then when he dies, he pops into a bunch of more saplings that are going to be like his last breath and take out a few enemies. So very, very cool tank. Taric, on the other hand, so Maokai is our like damage dealing tank. Taric is a true 5-cost tank. And we haven't done this in a while because oftentimes it leads into very stale endgame comps. I think there's a lot of variation we can do in this set as well that won't lead to that. And if it does happen, we will adjust it obviously. But Taric is a true tank. Emerald aspect is a bonding trait. So you hover a unit over Taric and he will bond with them. And whenever he casts, he will give that bonded ally a buff. That's pretty simple. Not that crazy. He's a Vanguard, is a true tank. He has 65 mana and he's not mana locked. So he's a spam casting tank. Anyways, his passive is the first time Taric or his ally that's paired with drops below 50% health. He shields all enemy allies within 3 hexes. And this is a pretty big shield that scales up his HP. So if you itemize Taric, he's basically shielding your team for a ton, kind of a pseudo invulnerability for those 3 seconds. Again, it's a short shield because it affects so many units. So usually you want to pair a frontliner and a backliner. So you shield your frontline and you shield your backline. His active, he just heals a small amount of health, and his paired ally will deal 100 bonus magic damage on their next 2 attacks. Pretty small amount of damage, but he is 65 mana. So when he's your main tank, he's like chain casting, and he's bumping up that damage a lot. So those are the 5 costs. Overall, I'm really excited for the set. This is going to be the end of the content for this video, right? Just champions and traits. This has already been a really long video. My voice is dead. Really excited to keep doing stuff like this. So I think closer to PBE, and even during PBE, expect more videos going more in depth once people are more familiar with the content. Especially want to talk about the set mechanic, which is wisps, new augments, and we are doing some key system changes and just the future of the set I'm going to talk about. So super excited, as always. Thank you for listening and thanks for playing. And until next time.